Well, we're only one day into the new year and already the ABC is under fire, this time for last night's racially charged Sydney fireworks coverage. ABC host Charlie Pickering began the broadcast with this.
I'm Zan Rowe.
And I'm Charlie Pickering. We are thrilled to be coming to you live from Gadigal land for the New Year's Eve celebrations.
Gadigal land, OK, we expect that from the ABC, but then viewers had to sit through the now obligatory Welcome to Country, during which Joanne Bell lauded an Aboriginal who fought against Europeans.
To kick things off, our Welcome to Country, performed by Auntie Joan Bell and Paquita Bell.
My name is Joan Bell. I am a proud Wiradjuri Gadigal woman. We honour our elders and leaders, including Barangaroo, Pemaway and many others who fought the first boat people who landed in Sydney Cove.
Fought the first boat people who arrived. OK, whatever. But then right before the 9 p.m. fireworks, when children around the country were tuning in, the ABC showed a performance from Indigenous group 3% that really annoyed parents in particular. And I can understand why. Have a listen.
It's the stolen generations haunting trauma that I see. And that's a part of history on which we never speak. Always moving backwards keeps the future out of reach. Let's separate the men from the boys. They got that money on the market and they failed to hear the voice. They stole the land in the name of their kings. Now look at how they act when you mention Alice Springs. You know that
It's all pretty angry. They locked us up and threw away the key. Stolen generations. Aboriginal people are always moving backwards. Australians failed to hear the voice. Australians stole their land. Happy New Year, kids, from your friends at the ABC. To discuss this and more, I'm joined by Sky News contributor Everlyn Rae and history lecturer and author Stephen Shavura. Stephen, if this is what we're going to be served up on New Year's Eve, do you reckon most Australians will want Indigenous groups curating the 9 p.m. fireworks again?
No, and this is just the ABC's last hurrah. They lost the voice and they have to have the last word. And of course, these sorts of things, all they tell Australians, and we've got to be careful that these performers and these activists do not necessarily speak for the majority of Indigenous Australians, but essentially their message is, you are our enemies. You are our enemies. And that is only, it's not just going to make a lot of Australians just sort of not want sort of more Indigenous issues and organisers involved in New Year's Eve, but it's just going to set any legitimate cause for Indigenous Australians back. Because when you just keep pummeling the Australian public, calling them invaders, and saying ridiculous things like, we never talk about this. I mean, it's all we ever talk about. Right. I mean, where have these people actually been? You keep sending these messages, Australians are just going to say, fine, if we're the enemy, well, why would we help you? Yeah. You've just declared us the enemy. And I'm not saying that's what was going through their minds with the voice, but we saw a spectacular instance of how all this flunks with the voice, which failed so badly.
Evelyn, let me go to you. Is New Year's Eve fireworks the right platform to start doing social justice conversations?
Look, the simple answer is no, a big fat no. But look, there's very few things that's left for children and for families to enjoy that's not infested with political messaging from these overrepresented, noisy minority groups. Look, nobody wants a side of guilt with their fireworks, their families and the music. But this is the problem with the ABC. When your salary is paid by taxes, you don't have to worry about what viewers think because you know that you're going to be getting paid regardless of that. And if you privatise the ABC or if you made it a subscription base, I guarantee you that the network would be broke within 6 months and they would go under. And perhaps that's what us Australians should be pushing for.
I think you're probably right about that. Well, social engineers are at it again, trying to change how we speak to each other. Quality advocates want a language overhaul as part of an update to what they say are out-of-date anti-discrimination laws in New South Wales. Now, part of the language they want to change includes saying sibling instead of brother and sister, and you've got to say different sex. You're not allowed to say opposite sex. Stephen, this attack on language, is it really about inclusion or is there something else going on here?
Yeah, well, the progressive left behind this, they know very well that the way we think is to a large extent determined by our words and our language. And if they can control the language that we hear, if they can control the words that we hear, the language that we speak, then indirectly over time they know that they can control people's thoughts. And what this is ultimately about is controlling people's thoughts through controlling the language. They say things like, oh, we've got to get with the times, but really they're trying to drag the times over to where they are, and the only way they can do it is with propaganda and state coercion, and this is just a perfect instance of it.
Well, Everlyn, let me go to you. News from America, where USA Boxing have just announced that men identifying as women will be allowed to fight in a female category, provided they've had a sex change and maintain low testosterone levels. Now, Australian boxer Ebony Bridges has slammed the decision on Twitter, writing, "This is wrong on so many levels. I will never agree to this. It's bad enough having trans women breaking records in other sports like track and field, swimming and powerlifting, but it's a bit different to them breaking our skulls in combat sport where the aim is to hurt you." Everlyn, would you want one of your female friends or family members paired in the ring against a transgendered boxer?
Look, I don't know about you, James, but I'm old enough to remember a time when violence against women was frowned upon, not something we would search to find loopholes in or technicalities to get around. I mean, we've already seen overseas the repercussions of biological men versus women in violent sports, such as skulls being completely fractured. It is appalling and it has to stop. And unfortunately, the only way it will end is if women just refuse to compete against biological men. I mean, sure, it might cost them a few medals in the short term, but in the long run, it's going to ensure that every gold medal in the future is given to a woman. And I mean, it's one thing having to put up with pronouns and walking on eggshells, but I actually think the sports movement is going to be the transgender movement's undoing, because people might tolerate the eggshell walking and the pronouns, but what they're not going to tolerate is seeing their daughters and their sisters getting beaten up by blokes in the ring. The average Australian and the average person won't put up with it.
I read this bit of news and I thought, is it going to take a woman being killed to finally end this transgender madness? Anyway, let's go to other news. It may be the start of a new year, but many of the same debates rage, with as many as 80 councils across Australia dumping citizenship ceremonies on January 26. Now, you'd think that receiving your Australian citizenship on Australia Day would be a great honour, but a growing number of councils are refusing to hold events this year, thanks to the Albanese government, which revoked a rule that effectively forced local councils to hold ceremonies on Australia Day. Stephen, how do you think new citizens will feel about being unable to receive their citizenship on Australia Day because woke councils say, oh, we don't want to upset Indigenous people?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to necessarily speak for all sort of new immigrants, new citizens, but what I will say is that these local councils need to remember that these people are becoming citizens of Australia, not citizens of the Sydney Council, not citizens of the Melbourne Council, but citizens of Australia. And there is no mandate from Australians to change that date. And so they're arrogating a right to do something that they have no right to do. These are people who are becoming citizens of Australia, and that particular ceremony should reflect the national law and the sort of the national feel that the 26th of January is the day of celebration, the day to do such things.
Yeah, very good point, Stephen. Everlyn, Sydney Lord Mayor Clover Moore, she says that the 26th of January is a painful day. It's distressing for Indigenous people. It's a hurtful day. But at the same time, Sydney Council put on a whole host of Australia Day activities. So it's kind of hypocritical, isn't it? If it's a painful, terrible day, then scrap everything, surely.
Yeah, it's up there with every other Invasion Day politician who complains about colonisation, all whilst pocketing the King's currency. You'd think for such moral advocates, these sorts of people wouldn't want to participate in receiving dirty money. But, consistency isn't something we have come to expect from these sorts. There are many days on the Australian calendar that are dedicated to Indigenous Australians. I mean, I can't even count how many, but I can count the ones that are purely dedicated for all Australians on two fingers, and they are not happy with those. And, we're being told that there's issues with them. It's not so much a concern for Indigenous Australians as much as it is a hatred for the white man. And we have seen it time and time again, and we need to start electing politicians who love Australia, not just minority groups, but the whole whole of Australia, and not those who are going to apologise for who we are and what our grandparents built so that we can all live freely and prosper here in our nation, unlike many nations across the globe who unfortunately don't get to live as privileged as we do.
Well, here we are on January the 1st. I suspect we'll be having this debate for the next 4 weeks. Well, thank you, Everlyn. Thank you, Stephen.